While some parents debate the benefits of public or private school, many can't afford the choice and are still seriously struggling with the costs of a so-called free education. One mum even sold her car so the kids could go to camp. So why are we paying so much, and is it worth it? For today's agenda, we are joined by Senior Advisor at Good Education Group, Sam Sapupo, and mum and finance expert Canna Campbell. Thank you both of you for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
Now, Sam, you've been involved in the education system now for something like 25 years. Is it fair to say there is no such thing as a free education?
Well, we always paid our taxes, and so the government's always looked after education. But it is certainly one where costs are starting to increase, and now what we're seeing is fees, and we're also seeing costs on top of those fees, whether it's a state system or a private and independent school.
And that's the thing, isn't it? These costs on top of the fees, what exactly are we talking about?
In most cases, the surveys our parents talk to us about is the increasing trend towards school uniforms. And then there's the laptop programs, the bring your own programs that schools are part of the technology introduction in schools. And they're also talking to us about the extra costs of what, when we went to school, we called them excursions or camps or co-curricular, extracurricular activities. And now schools are beginning to talk about them as education beyond the classroom.
But of course you've got to pay for all of that. And Kenna, your son, he's starting school next year.
Yes.
Have the costs surprised you?
Yes, it wasn't until I actually saw the list of all the things I have to buy for him and how quickly those things add up. You know, it can be very overwhelming. You're like, where do I start? How do I break it down? And how do I spread this into my own budget? Absolutely.
Because it's more than just buying them, you know, a pair of new school shoes and a school uniform and a couple of textbooks, isn't it?
It's, you know, backpacks, sporting equipment, you know, musical instruments. It really does add up. And you obviously want your child to have everything possible, but you also don't want it to be detrimental to your finances and take on additional financial stress.
I was just looking at the lists here, you know, technology and library contributions. I mean, are things like this compulsory? I mean, what do you do if you don't have the money to cover that?
That's a really good question, and we encourage all parents to, if you're struggling with or a family circumstances change, is make an appointment, go and see the school. I couldn't tell you how caring schools are, having worked in them for a long time. And they care for your child, and they know how important a stress-free family environment is. So they've got different options available to them, and once you speak to them, I'm sure you can work those out.
Have you heard some stories about families at their wits' end and just looking at the bills piling up? They don't want their kids to miss out but have no idea how they're going to afford it?
Absolutely. I know a single mother with 2 children, and she was desperate to get her children to a good school. She went and had made a meeting with the headmaster and said, look, I love this school, I think my children would thrive here. And they actually negotiated a fantastic discount to help her, and it's saved her.
Okay, so schools will work with families.
Look, absolutely. Most schools now want a diversity in their communities, and so they do offer bursaries and means-tested type scholarships. So I'd say to people, apply. You've got nothing to lose if that's where you think your child should be.
And I guess we've got this situation now where, you know, as parents, we're demanding, we want more for our kids, we want as much as possible, but someone has to pay for it.
Look, absolutely. And having been involved and I've built more budgets for schools than I can ever talk about, it's a lot of thought goes into those budgets. And so therefore, what people have to appreciate is it's probably the most difficult task, or one of the most challenging tasks that a principal faces with their leadership team each year. It's almost a 3-month process from start to finish, where you're reviewing programs that you're currently offering and evaluating whether they're effective or not, because you know dollars count. And then you're trying to look at what are the real needs of your students and your school in the coming years, and how do we meet those? And then you do what every household budget does, and that is start to work out the conflicts. Inevitably, I think when we start with a budget, it's always got at least $2 or $3 of needs versus the $1 you've got available to spend. And once you've worked through those priorities, and understanding your cohort of families. I mean, there are genuinely cases where schools will keep parts of the program outside the normal sphere because they can't afford it and they think something's really important that they need to do within the school fee system. And that's where we get the additional costs, which they say, you know, it's an extracurricular activity. We used to subsidise this. We can't afford to do that at the moment, so you make it voluntary.
But it's very hard though when all, like if you're the kid and everyone else is doing these extracurricular activities and you're the one who's missing out because mum and dad say, you know, we just don't have the money.
It's heartbreaking, but there are lots of different things you can do to try and break down those costs, and little things from getting second-hand sports equipment and uniforms to asking, you know, the community to help and talking to the trainers and the teachers to get a discount. There are lots of options out there. It's not a matter of you can't or can. You know, it's not black or white. It's grey. We can really try. And look, every child is different. Just like we shouldn't overschedule our lives, we shouldn't also overschedule our finances. We've got to balance it. So look at the individual child and pick maybe one thing rather than 3 or 4 different sports for the child, that one sport that they can specialise and focus all their energy on, and encourage them to work on that.
It's okay to say no to your child.
Yes, look, it is.
It's very healthy.
And it's all, and as you're going through this at the very moment, and that is, we have a wonderful array of schools at all different philosophies. So doing your research and choosing the right school for your child is really important. And part of that is, can we afford what's being asked for? And we all know that fees and what's best for your child don't always marry up.
Canna, have you added it up? Do you have an idea of how much it's going to cost to send your son to school next year?
I have. I've got a good figure in my head as to what I've got to budget for it, but I'm not going to let it throw me off the path. Little things like holding out for the sales, buying second-hand uniforms, asking any of my friends with older kids if they have any hand-me-downs, those sorts of things. Doing research. I won't be shopping at Kiki stationery. I'll be going to Officeworks. I'll be buying in bulk. And one thing is for sure, I will be labelling everything, because if my son Rocco is anything like me, I lost everything. But you know, you just break it down. Don't try and do it all in one big hit. I'll be buying the summer stuff now, and then I will buy the winter stuff later in the year. I'm not going to overwhelm myself. Just take it slow and steady.
And more importantly, how are you feeling about your baby starting school?
You know what? I'm so excited about the break from daycare fees. I'm going to be loving that extra
Well, that's
cash.
the thing, isn't it? School's cheaper than daycare.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, Sam and Canna, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, up next, we go live to Melbourne for some very